Welcome back. Let's discuss the current election climate with Barry Rhulani Hanyane. Barry, thank you so much for joining us. What is the feel, the mood this year? We did a roundup last week with our reporters, and there was so much dissatisfaction in nearly wards across the country about poor service delivery and, of course, electricity.
Annika, good morning to you. Good morning to your viewers. Look, it all depends which province, it all depends which ward you're focusing on. It all depends which municipality you want to measure the so-called political temperature in these elections, especially now before people went to cast their votes. This morning, it looks like somewhat quiet. We're hoping that numbers are going to pick up. And I think it's important we keep watch on areas that were somewhat visited with a bit of violence, a bit of intimidation, and to follow it up. Let's not forget that the president has ordered the deployment of soldiers on the ground, but then, of course, the security agencies through SAPs as well are on the ground, and we look forward to them intervening where possible in curbing some of these violent activities from happening.
Barry, in your experience, do fed-up voters stay home or do they head to the polls?
Well, seemingly there is the somewhat of a conviction that in some places disgruntled or disillusioned voters would want to vote with their feet, and they wouldn't see themselves closer to your voting districts. And this is unfortunate. But then, of course, it is understandable to a certain degree that there is a certain degree of anger out there, a certain degree of disappointment, obviously in relation to the speed and perhaps in some instances the quality of public services that those residents have either received or not received as anticipated.
Barry, have the coalitions in three of the main metros from 2016 been an outright failure in terms of service delivery, or have they managed to sort of right themselves over the past 5 years?
Well, look, it was, relatively speaking, a first of its kind at that level. Quite rightly, if you look at the history of coalitions in this country, you'll have to go back to the Western Cape, years gone by. And once again there, things were not necessarily as successful as one would have loved to see. Unfortunately, once again, a learning curve and compounded perhaps by complexities that are somewhat by own design. If you look where EFF was involved, EFF would complicate things by suggesting that their involvement is not a pure coalition, but more of a coalition arrangement, knowing very well that, rightly so, ideological differences were pertinent, and of course, other issues that rose during the tenure of such relationships. So I'm hoping that going forward, some of these political parties have learned their lessons. Coalitions themselves are not a panacea to solve all the problems of governance that are experienced at local government level.
Traditionally, Barry, a poor voter turnout is not good for the ANC. How do you expect the youth to deal with this election? There seems to be a lot of dissatisfaction, and so many I've spoken to saying, well, they just aren't really bothered.
Well, the ANC has itself to blame, isn't it, Annika? I'm looking at Luthuli House and say, why did they take time to resuscitate the youth movement within the party and make sure that checks and balances are put in place, make sure that they implement learned lessons given the impasse, as it were, that the youth within that party has experienced. one of the big parties, and yet youth structures within its ranks have not been fully functional. I think it's an own goal. They will rue the moment of not actually putting in place a stronger structure so that going forward, they are able to galvanize support, attract more youth into their ranks. Unfortunately, this is one particular elections that I suppose they will have to pay a heavy price for that.
Barry, last question. This is really an election about bread and butter issues. It's about potholes. It's about service delivery. But recent polling by Ipsos says so many voters still look to the national figureheads of the main political parties when casting their vote.
I think that's imposed to them, and it's unfortunate because the imposition itself deprives us of getting to know who our future local leaders are, what are they made of, what are they offering, should we have confidence in them as early as now to take tough decisions, but decisions that are reflective of common interests, of aspirations, needs, wants of your local people. It's just unfortunate that the faces of national leaders have been used in campaigning, and thereby, unfortunately, depriving us of a chance to interact, a chance to get to know who our local leaders are.
All right, Barry, thank you so much for your insight there, and we'll be speaking to you throughout the day.